delighted to say that Michael Fabricant joins me in the studio now. Welcome to the programme. Now, a lot of people won't understand exactly the structure of how Downing Street operates at the moment. Could you run through what the problem is with this whole Cabinet Office situation and why a separate office of the Prime Minister might be better?
Yes, I mean, a lot of these news stories coming out about drinking parties are actually nothing to do with the political team or Prime Minister. It now turns out that it was civil servants drinking, and we know that, for example, on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral, one of them was a going-away party. And, you know, at the time, Boris was 40 miles away in Chequers, and the Prime Minister wouldn't have known about it because it was at a sort of junior level within the civil service. Now, the problem is this. For years and years and years, the people who work in Downing Street, the civil servants, are part of the Cabinet Office. And the Cabinet Office is some way away in Whitehall. And all the senior management are in Whitehall, which is a separate building. And I can tell you that if you have a pass to go to the Cabinet Office, it doesn't get you into Downing Street, let alone into the building. So what I'm arguing for is an idea that actually Tony Blair came up with and failed. And what Tony Blair's idea was that there should be an Office of Prime Minister, as you said. And why would that make a difference? It would mean that the senior civil servant management team would actually be based in Downing Street, because Downing Street, in a way, operates almost as a separate fiefdom, independent of the Cabinet Office, even though all the civil servants, and I think the special advisors too, are all paid for and report to rules for the Cabinet Office in a separate building. So it needs tighter controls, because it's quite clear that both in Downing Street and maybe in the civil service as a whole, and frankly, listening to what you were saying earlier on, I suspect businesses too, you know, had their own interpretation of what the rules should be.
So it's your argument here that the Prime Minister doesn't have enough control over the operation of the civil service, particularly when it comes to doing Downing Street business?
I would go further and say that the civil service itself doesn't have enough control over what goes on in Downing Street, because it is a separate building, because there isn't easy connections between the Cabinet Office. There is actually a secret tunnel, which I've been through, but you pass an armed guard and you have to have a very special pass to do it. But for all intents and purposes, it's a completely separate building. And the whole thing is becoming conflated now with what Boris Johnson attended, that garden party, which we all so famously know about, and other parties that were going on, which the opposition quite naturally are dancing up and down with glee about, suggesting that these all were attended by Boris Johnson, when in fact it's quite clear that, as I say, junior civil servant events, why would he know? In fact, I did a radio programme yesterday, and the interviewer, who claimed to have been working in Downing Street before in the Labour Party, was saying, oh, well, you know, Gordon Brown would have known about it and come running down from his flat. What utter nonsense, because the flat is above number 11. It's on the 5th and 6th floors of the building. Most of these parties, if they were going on, and some of them were going on, we know that, would have been on the 1st and 2nd floors.
Or indeed the basement, as one of those was.
Yes, indeed.
But I suppose, of course, you'd expect the Labour Party to conflate every different sort of party. You'd expect that...
we would have done the same in the circumstances. It's politics.
But that doesn't change the fact that there were some of those events that the Prime Minister himself did attend, particularly those ones in the garden. Now, epidemiologically, we might say that that's clearly a lot safer than sitting in a stuffy office with someone.
Or indeed in someone's kitchen, as Keir Starmer did, because...
But of course, the rules weren't all that logical at many points. And many people who are very frustrated with the fact that the rules seemed to be so illogical. Well, if the Prime Minister could not follow them, why couldn't everyone else? Would it be your view as a Conservative MP that some of those people that got fines during those period should be reimbursed?
Well, that's an interesting one. I've never thought of. That's a judicial question. What I would say, and do agree with you, is that not only did people interpret the rules, I don't think they understood the rules. And the problem was because the epidemic was constantly changing. So the rules had to constantly change. But they were, in times, illogical, as you say. So I don't think it was just that people didn't care to stick to the rules. I don't think they understood them.
Do you think
and
the
time
Prime
will
Minister
suggest
understood them?
Oh, I don't know. How can I say? I mean, how can I get in? Nobody can get in Boris's mind. It's quite frightening to even think about it. But, you know, also listening to your monologue earlier on, I always say monologue, although it's a good broadcasting term, sounds rude, actually. But listening to what you had to say earlier on, and there could be changes coming. I mean, I was reading that because of the way we've handled COVID, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine are now saying that England, possibly the UK, could be the first country in the Northern Hemisphere to actually leave the epidemic. We're already seeing the amount of numbers of people catching it going down in London, and it's plateaued in the West Midlands.
And if that happens and the restrictions go, potentially that's a new lease of life for Boris Johnson. It's an interesting question as to whether he would get any recognition for that. I'm afraid we've run out of time on this interview, but Michael Fabricant, thank you very much for your very interesting thoughts there this morning on The Briefing on GB News.